Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's 12 o'clock in Washington, D.C., and we're so happy to be with you. Welcome to YSA's Youth Service Institute. This plenary session is focused on a youth leader focus group discussion. So we're particularly excited to hear from voices of youth sharing their effective practices and ideas for how we can all be building this movement. YSA is grateful to the Allstate Foundation for sponsoring the Youth Service Institute and this plenary session. And for those of you who have been with us for other sessions at the Institute, you've heard about YSA's 50 by 250 campaign. For those of you who might not have joined other sessions, I'll tell you briefly about what we're up to. YSA believes that young people, communities, and democracies thrive when we all work together for the common good. And our mission at YSA has always been to really bring together the field, bring together youth, bring together many different streams and strands of partner organizations to enable youth to work together for the common good. So that is really the background of what we are thinking about this new campaign. The 50 by 250 campaign that YSA envisions really kind of brings YSA back to its field building roots when we started in 1986 to think about how different kinds of organizations that work with youth can come together to kind of do these big mission building strategies that you see here under the 50 by 250 campaign. To support that, YSA does its own programs around campaigns, which are the big days of service, 9/11 Day, Martin Luther King Day, and Global Youth Service Day in the spring, as well as Service Vote, our election-based work, and adding service to ongoing activities around youth development programs. We also support those campaigns through grants to youth and to organizations. Trainings and resources, recognition and storytelling, and we hope that you get our youth service briefing, which is a field newsletter which comes out every Thursday night. On the next screen here, you'll see a little bit about how we started thinking about this campaign, because we recognize that there are some big barriers to youth participation. The first one of those barriers is lack of opportunities. We know that not all youth are asked to participate, and yet we know that that is the main reason that youth volunteer for the first time. So we are particularly conscious of how we can reach not just some youth, but all youth to know that they are valued and can participate in work for the common good. The second area that we look at is lack of skills and knowledge. When youth and organizations that support them may not know what the best way is to participate, how to make an effective difference around a community area that they are looking at. The next area is lack of access and resources. We know that there are barriers around time and funding and transportation issues, things that really provide kind of very tangible and logistical barriers to participation. And finally, lack of connection, lack of youth seeing opportunities as meaningful or believing that they can make a difference. So we've really kind of geared our solutions at YSA, as you'll see at the right, around asking youth to participate and then supporting them through training, funding, and recognition. A bit about our 50 by 250 campaign, which I mentioned in the beginning before I turn things over to my colleague, Katie. YSA started thinking about the 250th, thanks, Mike, he's going back. YSA started thinking about the 250th birthday of America coming up on July 4th, 2026. And we know right now that about 25% of youth across America are engaged in youth participation activities. And so we would like to take the next few years to really come together as a field, engage lots of different partners that work with youth to double this number to 50% by America's 250th birthday. So that's where the name 50 by 250 comes for this campaign. We don't want to stop at 50%. We want to keep going after that to the point where all youth are engaged. But we know that this is kind of a tangible piece that we can take on over the next few years. So we're really excited to have so many great partners and youth working with us and continuing to build that kind of groundswell of efforts over the coming 4 years. So with that, Mike, you can go back to where you were taking us in the beginning, and I will turn things over to my colleague, Katie Rausch, who's our Director of Partnerships, and she'll tell you a little bit about this session and welcome our facilitators.
Thanks, Karen. Hey, everyone. My name is Katie Reich. I am one of our Directors of Partnerships at YSA, and I'm going to argue that I have the best job out of all of my colleagues because I have the fortunate opportunity of working with youth like the Changemakers who are participating and facilitating this panel today. I have an option. I get to work with them every single day. So I'm going to argue that I probably have the best job at YSA, and being able to see all of the brilliant ideas that youth changemakers have, and seeing how they're implementing them in their communities, and really being able to support them and to support them in making their visions a reality. So as Karen mentioned earlier, some of the programs that we have include grant opportunities as well as recognition opportunities. And so our panelists and moderators today are part of that group. Many of our youth have been recent recipients of our youth grants, whether they are our Sodexo Stop Hunger grants for youth who are looking at ending childhood hunger in their community, our Hershey Heartwarming grants for youth who are looking at making kinder and more inclusive communities, or our allowance grants, which focus on showing younger youth that they have power and helping make their ideas for change a reality. Or some of our youth may be working with our organization grantees, and some of our youth have been recognized through our weekly Everyday Young Hero program, where we recognize the work that youth are doing every single day of the year. And you can read more about all of these programs on our website at ysa.org. And many of them have also been featured in that youth service briefing. So this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, our youth leaders are going to talk about their experiences as change makers and leaders of change in their community. But then we're also going to ask them to talk about some of the challenges that they've experienced and how we as peers or caring adults can help can work collectively with them to create a system where service is considered to be a daily occurrence, and where we're able to increase access and lower the barriers to participation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our two facilitators, Lily and Matisse from the Iowa Youth Advisory Council. They're going to be the ones at the helm of this afternoon's conversation, and we'll give it to them to kick things off, do introductions, and start with our first set of questions. Lily, Matisse, off to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lily. I'm 18 now, just turned 18, and I am going to be a freshman this year in college. And so some of the volunteer work that I've done is a lot of it with the State of Iowa Youth Advisory Council. You might also hear me refer to it to SIAC. That is our little name that we call it. So SIAC stands for State of Iowa Youth Advisory Council, like I said, and we have 21 members on our council throughout the state of Iowa. And our whole goal is to figure out the youth issues in Iowa. And then we create position statements to then send to the legislators and try to get them to sponsor our position statements to then create bills and get those passed. So a lot of the work that we do is all volunteerism. We don't get paid for anything we do. And I have been a part of the council for 4 years now. And I've probably gotten around for doing what I do on SIAC. So I am the current chair of SIAC. And a lot of the things that SIAC have done is we did a barriers to youth service report. So we sent out a Google form to people asking for their opinion on issues that they see in Iowa on relating to service. And then another thing is SIAC has received the Governor's Volunteer Award for the last 2 years. So we're very big on volunteerism and trying to get our voices out there. Matisse, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. My name is Matisse. I am 17. I'm going to be a rising senior. I live in Iowa City, Iowa. I'm on the Iowa Youth Congress, which is very similar to SIAC. We kind of work in partnership with them. And then I'm also on the Volunteer Iowa Youth Committee along with Lily, where we worked on the Volunteer Iowa State Service Plan just this past month. And then besides that, I volunteer a lot in my community with local nonprofits, like thrift stores. I volunteer at a farm to table organization and other things like that. And I'm looking forward to hearing all your perspectives. So if we want to just go around, someone can unmute and introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Ethan Hill. I am the founder of Ethan's Heart, where we work with people in the homeless community to provide them with supplies and resources to help them with their day-to-day lives. And I've been doing that for about 6 years now.
Hi, my name is Sina Farhadi. I'm going to be a rising freshman at UC Berkeley this fall, and I'm the founder of the Learning Enrichment and Assistance Program, or LEAP, which essentially is a program that aims to support homeless and foster youth students in my school district, both academically and kind of socially through peer-to-peer tutoring, and also kind of raising funds, monetary and material goods to distribute to these programs to support them and their families.
Hi, my name is Michelle Jimenez, and I'm going to be a rising junior, and I'm at Franklin High School. I'm currently 16 years old, and things that I've done in my community include a lot of drives. So I was a community service chair at my high school, so I was able to conduct used clothing drives where we were able to raise and get donations for used clothing to then donate back to our community, as well as our Cans for Kids food drive, which was able to replenish our pantry at our school to provide students that don't have access to food at our school.
Hi, I'm Lana Anderson from Small Things Matter, which is a nonprofit that seeks to combat food insecurity, and we're really focused on children. So our food distribution program serves over 1,000 local families each month. And then we also incorporate a crafting program and a literacy program to help support these underserved children's development in always, from their nutrition to their education.
Hi, I'm Max Serpenon. I'm from Boston. I'm 18 years old. I'm a rising freshman at Harvard, and I'm interested in pursuing writing and service leadership there. I co-founded a nonprofit called Catching Joy, which promotes youth volunteerism and activism. And I also serve as a reporter covering voices that need to be heard and trying to highlight people doing good in the community.
Alrighty, thank you everybody. I'm excited to hear more about everything, kind of going into detail of what you're doing and also more of your ideas that you'd like to see happen. So our first question today is, how would you describe the state of youth participation today? And going off of that question with how they're talking about trying to get 50% by 2026, what do you hope youth participation might look like by 2026? I'll open up the floor. Anybody who would like to answer, go for it.
All right, so in my experience of working with youth, I have seen that in some socioeconomic communities, some of those people don't really get to serve. It's slim in those communities. And by 2026, I would love to see an increase across the board of youth and young adults just participating in service in general.
I think that's a really. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I hope that by 2026 we're seeing more and more youth leading and also voices of diverse backgrounds, especially. I think representation matters, and young people bring really essential conversations that can challenge the status quo. So I hope we see a lot of voices of diverse backgrounds.
I think we've definitely seen an increase in youth participation. I'm seeing it in my school. I'm seeing it nationwide, where more students are getting involved with service projects and just outreach to encourage others to get civically engaged. I think that I hope by 2026 we have more youth serving with it, like by adults on school boards, on city councils, on city commissions. And the Walnut Creek Youth Commission, which is another organization I'm a part of, we recently kind of passed the policy proposal that took 2 years to get to city council. That's going to mandate one youth member on the Transportation Commission, the Arts and Recreation Commission, and the Parks Commission. Just kind of getting youth voice out there, and hopefully we see a lot more of that by 2026.
I definitely agree with what the other people have said about involving lots of voices from all over. But I think one other thing we should consider is even younger volunteers. At least in my county, middle and high school students are required to do some service and can earn like service learning hours for it, which is a graduation requirement. But younger children, in elementary school, I think definitely can also make a huge impact. But there's not as much emphasis on getting them to serve, and there often are not opportunities that are available for these younger kids. But starting people off early, especially, they might have more free time. Little kids are always more excited to try things. And getting that habit of completing service regularly is really important for getting consistent volunteerism for the rest of their lives, instead of just a few hours to complete a requirement. I think that's very important.
I agree. Unfortunately, at my high school and in my district and like nearby locations, they do not require hours of community service to graduate. So I think that's something that really shows, well, because of that, now not everybody participates in community service. So you have mostly like the student council kids or NHS kids or community service club kids that are being directed with volunteer opportunities. But I think what I would like to see by 2026 is getting all students overall in the entire school involved, just because that would not only be beneficial by increasing our numbers of volunteers, but also it would allow them to experience community service and create that habit that you were talking about of just service throughout their entire lives.
I think that's all really interesting points that you guys brought up. I kind of wanted to circle back to what Lana was talking about, because I know from my experience, before I was able to get around and drive, or like just being a high schooler opens you up to more freedom for what you do. So I feel like that's a big challenge that people in elementary school or middle school might face, is that like they need their parents to drive them there, or even they need an adult to be there with them while they volunteer. So I guess this can be opened up to anyone if they have a perspective, but like what ways can we get younger people to volunteer where they don't need a parent to be along with their side the whole time, and it gives them more individual freedom to do what they want?
Um, so my organization, Catching Joy, has actually worked with a lot of elementary and middle school students and getting them engaged in service. And I think one of the biggest things that we learned, and I agree with Michelle and Lana, that when you engage students in service early, it stays with them for the rest of their lives. And to your question, Matisse, I think that trying to bring service into schools is a great way to get them engaged. They oftentimes have time during the school day to work with their teachers on a service project. A couple projects that my organization has done, we had elementary classes making heart cards as a class during some of their time. And it can be used as sort of an educational opportunity too, because while they're working, or before they start working on the service project, they learn a little bit about the issue too. So they learn about what's happening in their communities, and it's a great opportunity for the teacher to sort of draw them in, get them curious, get them engaged and aware, and then they can put their energy and creativity towards some kind of service project. We also had a lot of elementary school students help us to make no-sew blankets during the wintertime that we donated to shelter homes. And so all these projects were completed as full classes.
Okay. So I think that definitely, well, I agree. School is a great way to make sure that there is some like adult supervision, but it's not an additional burden on students or parents. But in addition to that, I think making sure that there are lots of flexible opportunities at multiple, like, I guess, points in I'm not explaining this one, but like, for example, we do a lot of food distributions, and one thing that we like to give out is baked goods, because it, makes the families happy, makes sure that even lower income people still get to enjoy treats just like everybody else. And so some volunteers are able to come out in person and serve the baked goods, but others, can just stay at home and bake them by themselves. They could drop by the store and grab something for us. We're trying to make sure that there are these multiple levels and ways to participate so that it's a little bit more flexible based on your situation. And so I guess making sure that there are different ways to get involved with the same goal is useful for, trying to help remove this barrier.
Another thing that I was also thinking about, those were both really good points. I think the school aspect of things is really important. And I know some schools don't have like the silver cord programs or volunteer requirements, but when they do, um, that's a really big motivator I've seen, because my school does have silver cord and a lot of people use that, which is just like a volunteer award if you're unfamiliar. The second question that we wanted to touch on is, what do you think inspires youth to get involved, and what issues are most important to you and your peers? So open the floor. Anyone can answer that question.
I can go. I think youth are inspired by a really strong sense of social justice and a desire for a brighter future. I think we care about poverty and hunger, racism, gun control, women's rights, climate change, student debt. I think we value diversity, inclusiveness, empathy, and kindness. And I think in general, young people are just not accepting of the status quo. They recognize that there are problems that need to be fixed. And I think we're not ignoring them or waiting for change. And young people recognize that it starts now, and it starts with young people.
I agree with you, but I think that for young people, it's more about them seeing other people that are like them doing the work in the community that they want to do. Like for me, it was the repetitiveness of seeing the problem. Like most people are raised where if you see a problem, don't walk over it, pick it up. So that's my motto. But I think for me, things I focus on homelessness and just getting kids in the community to learn about service. But for others, it's really more of what they're going through at that moment. Like the things that they're most important in their lives can change at any second. Like if you come home and you see somebody beating on your mom, then your most important thing to you may be domestic violence. So it's more about really just letting them decide what's important than you deciding what's important and trying to force that on them.
Yeah, I 100% agree with both points that I raised. I think kind of hitting on what Ethan was saying, tangible change is pretty big when people are able to see something, they see a change, they see whatever their issue is, and they see something kind of going in a different direction. I think that for us, kind of like what Max was saying, social justice is huge for youth. I think people want to see a brighter future. People know that these issues are going to impact them in the future, and that current policymakers aren't going to be around long enough to see the effects. In my district, and I'm sure in many other school districts, they're redlined in a way where lower income individuals aren't able to necessarily have access to the same resources that other individuals in the same district are kind of having, and allowing them to succeed in higher graduation rates than the lower income youth. And I think kind of seeing these effects in your own communities is something that people kind of rally around, why educational inequality is so big amongst youth and why there's so much passion around that issue.
I completely agree. And I think that one of the main reasons that youth is able to want change so much is that there's more awareness now to issues just because of all the social media and like on TV and on the news, you see a lot of like problems. So I think that really inspires youth to want to fix them. And when they see a problem and they see that it's directly going to impact our generation and it's going to impact us and the people that may come after us, I think that really inspires youth to do something about it. And as for what's important for youth, I agree that, I mean, that could change for everybody depending on their own situation and what they see in their community. Personally, I'm really think that hunger, especially in children, is really important just because hungry children and children that have to worry about where their next meal is coming from are not going to perform as well as in school, so they don't get the same opportunities. And I think that that's really awful because they should have an opportunity to learn just like every other kid. So I think that's really important.
Kind of like a follow-up to what you guys have been saying, I also agree that like social justice, is a huge thing with people our age. And I'm sure you all see it all the time on social media, as do I, of people sharing different things about whatever social justice issue it may be, climate change, Black Lives Matter, all these types of things get shared all the time online. But to me, like the big thing that I'm trying to figure out what can be done about is that you can get like 100 people to share a social media post about we need more climate action or something like that, but not very many of them will take the next step. And so how do we get more people who care about these issues and have a passion for them, and obviously will like share things online about them, to volunteer or to take action by voting or like whatever social change it might bring? How do we get them to take the next step?
I think that something that could help with that is by informing them, because they might think climate change is really important, but then get stuck there and not know what to do after that. So maybe by making posts or just telling them somehow like what the next steps can be will encourage them to actually do them. Because if they don't know what the next steps are, then they can't really do them. So if you say like, oh, if you care about climate change, go vote for this person or go vote for this, so that we can actually see change. I think that would really help.
I kind of want to go off of this question as well and kind of go back to kind of the focal point of like why people aren't doing stuff about things, but then also how we are going to get more people to be inspired to do stuff. I think with us just having the conversation like today about what to do, I think people then now see that, hey, there is an issue and I need to be that one to go out and conquer that issue. So I feel like just even having this conversation today is helping a lot of people too, just to see that there needs change to be made. Is there anything else we want to add to this conversation?
Something else super important, I think, is that, yeah, of course, first, people definitely need to be educated about what opportunities are out there. But I think for someone who's not super experienced, having such a daunting goal as like solve climate change or solve childhood hunger can be a little overwhelming and prevent them from even starting to tackle it. So I think especially when we're trying to involve new volunteers, it's very important to break down these bigger goals into small, achievable steps to help people, you know, yeah, like I think one of the reasons why sharing a social media post and then not doing anything in real life is prevalent is because it's hard. And so if we give it to them in small bites instead of like a massive thing, that can definitely be much more achievable and give people much more confidence to then keep going and yeah, get into a habit and really ultimately make a huge impact.
Yeah, for sure. I really enjoy the conversation that we're having here. So let's even go deeper than that and let's go to topic 3. What barriers do or do you and your peers face to participating? And off of that, what do you think is needed to overcome those type of barriers that you see?
I think that there's so many issues that need to be addressed, and that the change can't come fast enough, and that's how it feels. It can be overwhelming and frustrating. I think we have to remember that change comes in incremental steps, and that we need everybody to step up to the plate. Every voice, every vote matters. Taking those small steps towards change. Oftentimes, I think young people, especially from underserved communities, are not heard, but their voice, ideas, involvement is critical to changing the landscape. And so I think in terms of overcoming those barriers, I think I'm grateful for organizations like Youth Service America, that empower and support young people to use our passion and power to change the world.
So some of the barriers I have faced was one, getting youth to just participate, and the other was trying to do events and get people to round up so we can just do anything during COVID safely and getting funding for those things. But some of the barriers they have to face are like we said, they have to get their adults to buy in. They have to get the adults to make their service a priority in their already busy lives. And we have to almost condition the kids to have a heart for service.
I think two barriers that I've seen are time. So when, especially in high school, when you're a little bit more busy, you might not prioritize service as much. So I think because of that, it's very important to provide opportunities that are more tangible and more time efficient, easier for students to do, maybe by providing opportunities of service in the school, even at the high school level. That way, students are spending the same amount of time like as they might be going to school, or it's close by, and they would be more likely to actually do service. But another issue, I think, is direction. A lot of students or peers may not have direction of how to volunteer or what to do. They might want to serve, but they don't know how. So again, I think that's why Youth Service America is very important. I know they provide trainings and everything, and I think that's also why leaders in the community are essential, because you can provide direction as to what students can do and how peers can make a difference.
I kind of wanted to add on to that barrier of time, because I know people in my life, I hear that all the time. I don't have enough time for this, or whatever it may be. Like, I'm too busy to volunteer, which is very valid in a lot of cases. But I feel like sometimes it also might be your own perceived lack of time. And like, is that really a barrier? Because, there's the saying, like, you make time for things that are important to you. And like, people spend arguably a lot of time online and like just scrolling and things like that. So like, you have time for that, but you don't have time to just do a small 1 hour after service, which I know everyone's lives are different, and some people that is truly the case. But I don't know. I'd just be curious to get your guys' thoughts on that. Like, how do we make people prioritize their time differently, which is a huge thing right now.
I think just making it known that service can be as quick as an hour is something that could really help, because maybe some students don't know that you can serve in 1 hour and actually like make a difference in that short amount of time. And I feel like community service, if you haven't done it before, it can be a daunting task that like may feel longer. So I think just telling them that you can do service in short amounts of time too.
I also think I agree that people make time for what they want to do, but I think service doesn't have to be something that is set apart from what people want to do or their interests or their talents. If we start allowing, especially in schools, students and young people to organize service that utilizes their skills, is very connected to the things that they enjoy doing. If you have a student who's an athlete, likes playing sports, there's things that you can organize. We had a basketball shootout that was very successful in sort of raising money for, I think it was the Jimmy Fund at the time. And it just doesn't, the service doesn't have to be the same templates of service that are usually given by the schools or by the community. It can be new forms of service, creative ways of getting involved with the community that you would actually enjoy and that are fun to do.
I definitely second that we should try to use people's talents and interests as much as possible. And another way to really keep people engaged and make them feel like service isn't like taking away from their fun time is to try to get people to bring along their friends, because it does, well, of course, increase the number of volunteers you have, which is great, but it also makes the volunteering into, just hanging out with a friend. And so it doesn't feel like a job. It feels, like something fun. And then I think people are much more likely to come back and feel positive about the whole volunteering experience.
Yeah, I think that 100% when service starts to feel kind of like a chore, kind of like what Max was saying, it's not something that people are used to. It's people think, oh, service has to be this, but there are so many different ways and so many different forms of service, and that you can kind of rally your passions around and rally your friends around to get involved. And just solely, I think, because people are used to kind of this template of volunteerism. When that's totally not the case now, and there's so many different ways to get involved and do things you're passionate about, kind of like all the young people on this panel today have done. And then I think for me personally, one of the biggest barriers that I face, and I think a lot of other youth face, is adults usually stand in the way. I mean, sometimes stand in the way. I shouldn't say usually. Sometimes stand in the way of youth who want to get involved, and youth who want to participate in civic engagement and be civically engaged and start service projects, because either they don't believe in you or they don't have the time, or don't feel like they have the time to support you through your project. So I think for me personally, perseverance was a pretty big thing. Continuing to email different adults in my community, continuing to call and kind of just try to get in contact with the right person. And eventually, when I found that right person, that mentor kind of helped me guide me through my entire journey with LEAP and through various other community service programs.
I kind of want to hit on something that Lana said. From a small town in Iowa, we definitely have like tons of cliques, and everybody sticks to their group, and they won't participate unless they have that friend who wants to go participate as well. I know that something that has helped in like my school is that they don't put a limit on how many people can come to like a certain activity that they need volunteers at. And so that really brings as many people in as possible, because that friend is not going to go unless that other friend goes. So it's kind of just a chain reaction of, if this person goes, then that person will go. So just allowing people to come in, no matter their strengths, abilities, or anything, is really hopeful, I feel like.
%50 goal, I think that will be a great tool to utilize to get to that goal. Something else I wanted to circle back around to, which can also increase participation, is the whole idea of, so if you could ask the adult decision makers in your schools, after school programs, youth organizations, nonprofits, or government, any adult decision maker in their lives, for support or policy change that would increase youth participation, what do you think it would be, and why would you ask for that?
So if I can ask any of those people to do anything, I would probably ask them to add incentives for service hours, or make like a community service project in your schools, add it into some of the school curriculums, and bring some youth leaders like us to be the examples for the students in the community.
Yeah, I've 100% seen when extra credit is involved with getting service hours. I think that the percentage of students that get involved definitely increases exponentially. So incentives are definitely a huge thing. I also think personally what really allowed youth in my community to get involved, students in my community to get involved, was getting access to resources. I know we talked about a lack of access to any sort of resource on how to get involved, how to be civically engaged, how to participate. And my school did a fantastic job of having a bulletin, having a Google Classroom full of constantly posting opportunities for students to get involved about a variety of different things, whether it was athletic service projects or working with educational equality or hunger, and so on. So I think definitely having adults post these things and constantly reminds their students that there are opportunities available to them if they're interested is a fantastic way to increase student participation.
Something that I would ask any policymakers to do is similar to what I've heard that some of your schools do, is add community service hours being mandatory to graduate, just because I feel like some students may not do community service just because they don't know how to, or they see like there's no immediate need for it besides like obviously there's the need for change, but if you're a student, it can easily be put in the back of your mind. So I think that if it's more like I need to do these hours because I need to graduate from high school, I think that will really launch students to start their community service projects and their activities. And I think hopefully that will get them involved more and more in the future, just because they realize that they can actually see the change that's happening and how like fun community service can be, and they'll just want to keep doing it. But I think that if we don't have that first like leap to it, then it won't really happen. But another thing that I've seen is sometimes there's just barriers on organizations itself that don't allow students to participate or aren't really geared for youth participation or youth volunteers. So I think if organizations and nonprofits start gearing their volunteer, like even their websites or their social media towards youth participation to make youth feel heard and youth feel wanted in all of these organizations, I think that would really help too, because it helps youth feel like they belong and they should go volunteer at those organizations.
I think that I have a couple ideas. I have two. I think one, introducing it to the school culture as something that is just as valued, that is just as important as other programs is important. I think the school administration and teachers and school boards set the tone of what's important at their schools. If oftentimes that's the sports programs, some schools it's the arts program, some schools don't. Some schools it's different. It depends on the school. But I think if service is introduced as something which the school values, puts resources into, sees as equal to these other programs, then it changes the perspective of the students too. And I think that the schools have a lot to gain from doing this. I don't think it's the schools setting this up for the students, only the students benefit. I think that when the school student body is engaged in service, I think it makes more driven, more purposeful students. It has given me a great deal of perspective, gratitude, motivation. And so I think it generally uplifts the student body if they put a great deal of emphasis on service. I also think that trust goes a long way in terms of resources and responsibility, especially for high school students. If school boards and teachers and leaders, adult mentors, put some trust in their students, I'm not saying just blindly distribute resources for student-led or projects, but if they trust students who have expressed interest, have created a plan, have ideas to take some of those resources and run with it, then I think that they'll get a great return on their investment. I think that young people really appreciate trust from adults, and they oftentimes rise to the challenge when they're given the trust and their responsibility.
Sorry, my computer crashed. That's why I had to leave. Something that I had been thinking about, though, that I wanted to circle back to before we had to end was what Ethan was saying, but this can be for everyone too, about in order to reach that 50% goal, we're going to need to reach a lot more people, which includes some people who maybe currently are just the beneficiaries of community service, but we're going to have to reach them to become active members in the community as well. So how do we bridge that gap between being someone who usually receives service to someone who's giving back to their community?
Well, really looking at it from the outside in, when you see somebody that's always on the receiving end of the help, there's a mindset that we always are getting the help, we can't give help. But we have to really go out and let them know that all help is received well and is needed. So it's not really the money, you need resources, you need this, that. It's really about getting them in the mindset of all you need is your time for a couple of hours, and you can make a big impact in the community.
I think it's also telling people, for those who are often on the receiving end, I think it may be easy to feel for them like they don't have a lot to give, and encouraging them. I agree with Ethan. Encouraging them that one of those big things that they have to give is time, but then also their talent, their idealism, their creativity, their compassion. There's a lot more than sort of money and resources that they have to give.
I think also it's partly the responsibility of the organization that is putting out the community service, that is participating in the volunteerism, to kind of ask any of the recipients of the community service, are you interested in getting involved here? Are you interested in doing this? Are you interested in doing that? And kind of bring them in into their groups, rather than kind of solely putting them in this lens of, oh, they're a beneficiary. Kind of seeing them in both ways, and double-edged sword.
I really think too, like going off of that idea, is that as youth, we sometimes feel like we are being a burden when we ask for help. And so I really want to emphasize on, like, if an organization needs help, or if a youth participation like needs help with participation of a service activity or getting their voice out there more, like, do not be afraid to ask for that help. And also don't feel a burden to ask for that help. I feel like that's something that as youth, like, we get shut down once, so then we feel like, oh, we're going to get shut down again, or we're a burden to that person. But just always moving forward and asking for what you actually need to get what you need done.
Something that I was thinking about too, that we touched on a bit earlier, is like incentives. And I know for me, there is like a Silver Cord program, volunteer service recognition at my school, but a lot of places don't have that. But I feel like adults don't really recognize that in youth. And oftentimes, if I'm volunteering somewhere, the first question will be like, oh, you're doing this for Silver Cord, right? Like, you want a recognition for this. Which I think is a common misconception among adults, that youth are only motivated by like an award or a recognition, which is a big motivator, so that's a fair point. But like at this point, for a lot of us, I know, and for many others, like, we're just doing this to give back. We're not in it for getting a Silver Cord at graduation. We're not in it for these other incentives. Like, youth can have incentives that aren't just motivated by one thing, but by actually being like kind to others, and the reward of giving back to others too. I feel like that's a big thing.
Thank you so much to all of our incredible panelists, our wonderful facilitators for leading and participating in this conversation. As we wrap up, I know we have a few minutes left in today's plenary session. Wanted to see if any of you had any closing thoughts or reflections on really anything that we've covered today, or youth leadership and youth engagement in service projects in general. Lily, would you like to kick us off with any final thoughts or reflections?
Yeah, definitely. I would still go back to that part of asking for the help that you need. And there are resources out there for you. Like, if anyone who is either on the, like a panelist or someone listening, like if you need a direction, a resource to get what you want done, there's tons of resources out there. And, you know, I would say also ask YSA for their help. Like, they are the person to go to for that help that you need. But yeah, as youth, also don't feel like you can't get something done. I think sometimes people think of, oh, like I'm a young person, so I can't get that done because my voice doesn't matter. That is completely not true at all. Just go out there and really try as hard as you can to get everything done that you want to get done. You only have a short amount of time in your life to do what you really want. And so get those goals done and do everything that you want. Get those done.
Thanks, Lily. Matisse, any closing thoughts?
I kind of wanted to second what Lily was saying there at the end. This is something that I try to spread a lot of when I talk to people in my school and community, is people are really afraid to take the next step and get more involved or do anything that's out of their comfort zone. And I know with everyone here on this panel, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, because obviously all of you guys have done incredible community service things in your own rights. But all it takes is the one first step. Really, once you send that one email or start thinking about this one thing, the ball just gets rolling and you gain momentum from there, and it only goes in that direction. But taking the first step is the hardest step, and it's also the most important one in making real change.
Thanks, Matisse. Lana, any closing thoughts? Oh, we'll actually come back to you. Apparently your mute, oh, there we go.
We're back. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just like to second what both of the other folks have said, that, yeah, everyone's scared to get started with service. It seems intimidating, but taking that first little step is really important. Taking that tiny step does really have a huge impact, and more importantly, it gets the ball rolling for a whole lifetime of service. So taking that first step is really important, and we should just try to encourage that as much as possible.
Okay, thanks, Lana. Ethan?
So I just want to second what everybody else is saying. The first part of a marathon is the first step. So I just encourage everybody to go out. If you have to ask. If you know what you're doing, go ahead and do it. It's more about getting in that mindset of it's easy to do this, rather than I don't know if it's going to be easy to do it. So I just want to encourage everyone that every day is a day to help someone in need, and just try everything once.
Thanks, Ethan. Sina, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think for sure, kind of emphasizing that it's not easy all the time. It's not just always, oh, we're going to get started. Oh, here we go, easy. A lot of the time, through all my volunteerism in high school, I was infantized, and people kind of talked down to me, and no one really. There were times where no one really believed in me, and it was hard. But I kept going because I knew that I had passions, and I knew what I wanted, and I knew I wanted to make a change. And that kind of leads into my second point, and is I think it's so important to find something that you're passionate about, to do, get involved in work that you truly have a passion for. We touched on that earlier. It makes it a lot more fun and more engaging. And obviously all service is fun, but truly when you love doing something, it makes it 10 times more enjoyable. And, it's never a goal to make service feel like a chore. So truly, if you're passionate about anything, if you're passionate about athletics, if you're passionate about educational inequality, if you're passionate about baseball, again, I don't know. So really anything that you truly love, go for it, go make a change in that field.
Thanks, Sina. Michelle, any final thoughts?
Yes, so I completely agree, and I'm also really inspired by what everybody has said. I think that one thing is also to not lose hope, just to remember that there are youth out there that are making changes to the community, and also to remember your why, the purpose of why you're doing something, because like Sina said, it does get difficult sometimes. So I think if you remember your purpose, your why, that really keeps you motivated, and it keeps you moving towards your goal even when it gets a little bit more difficult.
Thanks, Michelle. And Max, would you like to wrap us up with your final thoughts?
Sure. I think young people have a great capacity to be very big picture thinkers. And sometimes young people get criticism for that. But I think it's a great strength, and I would encourage young people to embrace thinking about the big picture, because it lends itself directly to service. I really like the Martin Luther King Jr. quote, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing to help others? And I think I would say that quote always reminds me that it's okay to prioritize empathy and kindness. I think a lot of young people lead busy lives and are doing a lot, and there's a lot of pressure. But if we think about what really matters, I think service is at the core.
Thank you so much, Max. And one more just massive thank you to all of you for joining and sharing your thoughts, your experiences, your perspectives with us today. For anyone that's on the call, I really challenge you to take into consideration what our youth leaders, our panelists, our moderators have shared with us this afternoon, and think about how you can use their thoughts, their experiences as in partnership with those of your own youth leaders, and how you can implement change to really encourage youth leadership and youth voice in your work, but also how we can work collectively to ensure more access to and more opportunities for youth to make that change in your own communities. And then with that, I will send off the mic to Karen for any final words.
I second Katie's thank you to all of our youth panelists. And I heard two things that make me very, very happy. One is I heard an incredible passion and dedication to youth changing the world in all forms, through bringing more youth to the table, more diverse youth, younger youth, youth that challenge the status quo, remember why we're doing this. All of that is just so obvious and so clear in what you're doing. And second of all, I heard a lot of great specific ways to go about doing that, and next steps and effective practices. So at YSA, we promise to keep listening, to keep putting your voices at the table and forefront so people are hearing them. And we're so excited to kind of capture all this and keep going and continue this movement. So thank you all. Thank you to all who are listening.